About a week after my post, I planted a wall of blackberries and raspberries at the two sides of my garden facing the driveway, about 30 centimeters from the edge, so no overhanging branches. On the other side of the berry wall, I planted lots stuff like strawberries and tomatoes. To reach the tomatoes and strawberries from the driveway, you have either go through the fruit bushes or walk up to my house. Walk about 2 m along the side of the house and my windows, and then walk into my actual garden. Not something you do by mistake. For about 2 weeks it was somewhat quiet, but I still found the kids on my driveway every single days. As far as I know, they did not enter the garden, and I hadn't noticed them walking around my house anymore. So I figured the bushes were working. About 1 week ago, berry season started, and my bushes are now full of raspberries, and there's lots of strawberries as well. The neighbors noticed. First I caught the boys picking and eating raspberries, so I told them off and dropped them off at home, told their mom I caught them stealing. That's how I see it, even though it's fruit, and that I'd call the cops next time. She huffed and told me to grow up, but took the boys inside anyway. After that it was quiet up until yesterday afternoon, when I went out for a while and found the dad and his 2 sons right in the middle of my garden when I returned, clearing my bushes and plants. I didn't even confront them, just called the cops from a distance as they hadn't noticed me yet, and started filming them after making the call. Luckily 2 cops showed up after 10 minutes or so, and they confronted the neighbor as they were still picking berries. They told them they were trespassing and that the berry picking was in fact considered stealing, and that I could press charges. For the first time I noticed a bit of fear in my neighbor. He was having trouble finding his words and kept looking back at his house, I guess hoping his wife would show to yell at the cops. They all went inside with the cops, so I just went home as well. After a while the cops came by and asked me if I wanted to press charges. I asked them if they felt like they scared the neighbor enough to stay away. I got a small smile and yes, about him, but the wife had just kept shouting at them and her husband about the little living next door. I told them no for now, asked them if I'd be allowed to get an extra camera set up on the wall between my garden and the road, to cover the entire front garden plus driveway. They said that's allowed as long as it's on my side of the wall. So, now I'm getting an extra camera installed. One neighbor knows I'm done messing around, but his wife isn't there yet, and if I ever catch any of them again, the cops will be called and possible charges will follow. My fiancé, James, and I have been together for 3 years, planning a wedding for October 2016. A few months before we met, James bought a brand new home in a newer subdivision. We recently refinanced it and added my name. Before me, James dated a woman, Britt, for about 7 months. She's never been to this current house. From what he's told me, they broke up when he decided they weren't as compatible. The breakup was rough, to the point where he and neighbors called the police when she wouldn't leave his front yard and was screaming at 10 p.m. at night. This is all from what he and his sister have told me. I don't have a reason to not believe them. I've only had a few run-ins with Britt. These have been at restaurants or just coincidences out in public. We never spoke up until now. The problem, Britt has bought a house in the same subdivision that we live in. We even share a cul-de-sac. The only reason we found out about this is from a flyer we got welcoming her to the neighborhood. Our subdivision is very community-oriented. James insists he's never told her where he lives and hasn't spoken to her since the night he called the police. We both brushed it off as a coincidence, but lately it's becoming very weird. Here's why. I work for a company that allows me to work from home 3 out of the 5 days. Our home is a ranch and my office window faces the street. I'm not sure what Britt does for a living, but she does not work during the day. From about noon until 3, she spends her time walking up and down our street. When she passes our house, she doesn't take her eyes off of it. It's almost like she can see me in the office. She'll even stop in front of our house and stretch there for about 5 minutes. Every day anyone is at home. It makes me uncomfortable to the point where I have all of our blinds closed during the day. I understand the need for exercise, but she walks for 3 hours just going up and down our street. Another issue is when either James or I are outside with the dog, she'll let her dog outside and it will come sprinting to our yard. This causes her to come and get her dog. Every time she says, "I'm sorry, we're still working on training." James and I are always polite. Normally, I would be okay with this, but James has pointed out that any other time she lets her dog out and we're not outside, she'll immediately correct him before he runs off. She never corrects him when we're outside. We've been getting ding-dong ditched a lot since she's moved in. Something that's never happened in the 4 years that James owned the house. The doorbell will ring around dinner time, between 6 and 8, and by the time anyone gets to the door, no one will be there. It's gotten to the point where our Doberman has picked up the routine and waits by the front door, pacing. The last issue, which I believe might be illegal, is that our mail seems to go missing for a while and then pop back up. What I mean is, Brit will knock on our door and say that she received our mail and is just returning it. This has never happened with the previous owners in her house. We don't have a new mail carrier either. It seems to happen once a week and she'll always bring it on a Friday night. Based on the date on the envelopes, we can tell she's been holding it all week. This has pushed James over the edge because she had our water bill, which resulted in us being 2 days late on the payment. James is neurotic when it comes to paying bills. Every time I have to convince him not to go over and yell at her because we haven't actually caught her taking it out of our mailbox as much as I try to monitor it. She usually gets 2 days worth of mail because those are the days I'm not working from home, the other days I get it right away. I'm not sure what to do at this point. I don't want to piss her off by confronting her, but how can I get her to stop? She's making us nervous and I feel uncomfortable in my own yard most of the time because I know she is watching. I know this sounds strange, but I'm not sure if I can legally do anything about it. I don't have anything against her, it's just becoming an annoyance. I come from a conservative Christian family. All my family members were / are involved in the church and have church-based jobs. When they met my wife, they loved her and embraced her as their own. We dated for 2 years and discovered she was pregnant after we got engaged. Invitations were already given at the time and we decided to still have the wedding on date when my wife was 5 months in. My family were furious when they found out my wife was pregnant. They asked if we even still considered having a wedding. I said why not, but they were very upset, especially mom and dad, who said they've always been known for their decency and good Christian values, and weren't willing to let this stain their reputation. As in my wife and I getting married while pregnant. They officially dropped out and refused to negotiate, saying it was done and I have only myself to blame for this outcome, and should move the wedding out of town. I was hurt. I tried to change their minds and checked with other members, but my brother said he had no intentions to look like a joke in front of his fellow church members and dropped out. My aunt pretended to be sick and said she may not be able to make it, she's 100% healthy. My cousin said he had business trip and stopped his wife and kids from attending, and my uncle cussed me out, torn the invitation and kicked me out. I felt terrible with no family members of my own to support me and share my joy at my wedding. I even broke down crying after the ceremony. I haven't spoken to them for months and then got busy with my 4-week-old daughter. My cousin reached out to hand me gifts and well wishes for the birth of my daughter sent from my family. I returned everything. He sat with me on behalf of the family, saying I shouldn't have returned gifts that were from my family who want to see and hopefully be involved in my daughter's life. He said Mom's longing to meet her grandbaby and everyone else is wanting to visit soon to celebrate my daughter's life. I asked him this question. I said, wasn't my daughter the reason why the entire lot of them abandoned my wedding? He just stared grudgingly as I went on about how they treated my daughter as something to be ashamed of and hide. My daughter at some point will ask about the wedding and I have no intentions on lying to her. He replied saying he guaranteed I got it all wrong and no matter what goes down between us I can never deny that my daughter is their granddaughter, //niece / etc. and they're her family. He asked that I arrange for them to visit, but I refused. He kept pressing the idea, but I shut him down. My wife says I should let them come, but I still refused. I'm a 30-year-old male and my best friend got married last week. I just bought a house and my wife is expecting our son in November. So I let him know I was limited in what I could contribute financially, but did tell him I would try my best. So, I went to the bachelor party in Maine, I rented the tux, and paid for mine and my wife's dinner at the rehearsal dinner. I also had a gift of $300 that I was going to give them, but we will get to why I didn't give it to them. His now wife, then fiancé, texted me multiple times a day with updates. Fine. I didn't always respond, and it got to the point where if I didn't respond at least once a day, I'd get a call from my buddy. I have a full-time job and am redoing some rooms in my house, so I'm busy. She texted me for the following reasons. 1. My wife was not allowed to talk about our pregnancy at all. She didn't want anyone to focus on that more than her, the bride. 2. She was not going to order special food for my wife. No one asked her to. My wife was fine with whatever she was going to be served. 3. I was not helping the groom enough. He had to help her with favors, seating charts and programs. So I had to help him with those things, according to her. She also said to get ready to help with thank you notes after the wedding. 4. She said if I was a true best man, I would offer to pay for the bar bill. I don't even know what that means. 5. She had to read to approve my speech before the rehearsal dinner and wanted to be included as much as my buddy. She told me to make up things if I had to. I was also not allowed to include anyone but the two of them, and no inside jokes or stories about my buddy that didn't include her. 6. Her last text said to tell my wife to keep it together and not make a pregnancy scene during the wedding. Also, she wanted her to choose a dress that downplayed her pregnancy as much as possible. I was just so aggravated. I spoke to my friend to see if he could reason with her. He told me to just play ball on this one. It's her day, and to cut him a break, because he'd be dealing with her nonsense for the rest of his life. I was annoyed but calmed down. The day of, all the bride and my buddy do is scold me, berate me, and bark orders. I head down to the bar for a drink. The bride's mother is there and warns me not to get drunk because I've ruined her daughter's day enough. I didn't give them the card with the cash and in the speech. I used my friend's exact wording about having to deal with her nonsense for the rest of his life. I wished them the best and told him I'd always be there for him, especially during the divorce.